Welcome to this congregation. We are the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Lower Bucks, and we welcome you. I'm Chris Ermer, your lay leader. Thank you for choosing to worship with us. Our UU community is built on love, connection, and acceptance. Acceptance for all of those who enter our space. We hope that today's message will help you on your personal and spiritual journey. We invite you to relax and enjoy this time together. For the month of February, our theme is love. Love is the power that holds us together and is at the center of our shared values. We are accountable to one another for doing the work of living our shared values through the spiritual discipline of love. Love is a foundation of the common good. The parable of the Good Samaritan emphasizes the necessity of loving your neighbor as yourself. The golden rule's reciprocity can unleash the power of love in the service of the common good. Today's speaker is Reverend Libby Smith. Reverend Libby Smith really needs not much of an introduction, since we had the honor of having her service as our full-time minister from 2007 to 2013. Now retired, she periodically is able to provide wonderful sermons for us. And her sermon title today is Loving the Small Things. The art of noticing and loving the smallest moments of beauty and grace around us can help us find the courage to keep saying yes to life, even in the midst of struggle and pain. This morning, we'll turn to the work of a variety of poets for illustrations on how to develop this capacity. And now for our prelude, we turn to our wonderful musician, Avi Wisnia.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. We're going to start this morning with a song that I grew up with, and certainly, hopefully, is familiar to most of you, by a poet known as Jonathan Larson, who wrote one of the great musicals of the 90s that is still relevant, especially when we talk about love and when we talk about all the small things and how we can measure love. So whether you're here in this room or on this Zoom, feel free to sing along. 525,600 minutes, 525,000 moments so dear, 525,600 minutes. How do you measure a year? In daylight, in sunsets, in midnights, in cups of coffee, in inches, in miles, and laughter and strife. In 525,600 minutes, how do you measure a year in the life? How about love? How about love? How about love? Measuring love. Seasons of love. Seasons of love. 525,600 minutes. 525,000 journeys to plan. 525,600 minutes. How do you measure the life of a woman or a man? In truths that she learned, or in times that he cried, the bridges he burned, or the way that she died. It's time now to sing out, though the story never ends. Let's date, remember a year in the life of a friend. How about love? How about love? How about love? Measuring love. Seasons of love. Seasons of love. Seasons of love. Seasons of love.
How about measuring in love? Thank you, Avi. A busy guy, got to bring him up here because I want to invite Avi Wisnia up to light the chalice candle today. Avi always lights a beautiful chalice of sound for us. And so today, as I read our opening words, to love life. To love life is to notice the wonders that abound. And to notice the wonders that abound is to be grounded here and now. And to be grounded here and now is the beginning of finding love for this life today. Let us ground ourselves in this instant, in the worship of all things good and right. The words of Reverend Daniel Chesney Cantor. This is where I introduce Libby Smith with the message for all ages.
Just in case you hadn't figured out that was me sitting in that chair over there. Well, last time I was here, I shared a story called The Other Way to Listen by Bird Baylor and Peter Parnell. This morning, I'm sharing another book by Bird Baylor and Peter Parnell called Everybody Needs a Rock. Everybody needs a rock. I'm sorry for kids who don't have a rock for a friend. I'm sorry for kids who only have tricycles, bicycles, horses, elephants, goldfish, three-room playhouses, fire engines, wind-up dragons, and things like that, if they don't have a rock for a friend. That's why I'm giving them my own 10 rules for finding a rock. Not just any rock, I mean a special rock that you find yourself and keep as long as you can, maybe forever. If somebody says, "What's so special about that rock?" don't even tell them. I don't. Nobody is supposed to know what's special about another person's rock. All right, here are the rules. Rule number 1, if you can, go to a mountain made out of nothing but 100 million small, shiny, beautiful, roundish rocks. But if you can't, any place will do. Even an alley, even a sandy road. Rule number 2, when you are looking at rocks, don't let mothers or fathers or sisters or brothers or even best friends talk to you. You should choose a rock when everything is quiet. Don't let dogs bark at you or bees buzz at you. But if they do, don't worry. The worst thing you can do is go rock hunting when you're worried. Rule number 3, bend over. More, even more. You may have to sit on the ground with your head almost touching the earth. You have to look a rock right in the eye. Otherwise, don't blame me if you can't find a good one. Rule number 4, don't get a rock that is too big. You'll always be sorry. It won't fit in your hand right, and it won't fit in your pocket. A rock as big as an apple is too big. A rock as big as a horse is much too big. Rule number 5. Don't choose a rock that is too small. It will only be easy to lose, or a mouse might eat it, thinking that it's a seed. Believe me, that happened to a boy in the state of Arizona. Rule number 6. The size must be perfect. It has to feel easy in your hand when you close your fingers over it. It has to feel jumpy in your pocket when you run. Some people touch a rock 1,000 times a day. There aren't many things that feel as good as a rock, if the rock is perfect. Rule number 7. Look for the perfect color. That could be a sort of pinkish gray with bits of silvery shine in it. Some rocks that look brown are really other colors, but you only see them when you squint and when the sun is right. Another way to see colors is to dip your rock in a clear mountain stream, if one is passing by. Rule number 8. The shape of the rock is up to you. There is a girl in Alaska who only likes flat rocks. Don't ask me why. I like them lumpy. The thing to remember about shapes is this. Any rock looks good with 100 other rocks around it on a hill. But if your rock is going to be special, it should look good by itself in the bathtub. Rule number 9. Always sniff a rock. Rocks have their own smells. Some kids can tell by sniffing whether a rock came from the middle of the earth or from an ocean or from a mountain where wind and sun touched it every day for 1,000,000 years. You'll find out that grown-ups can't tell these things. Too bad for them. They just can't smell as well as kids can. Rule number 10. Don't ask anybody to help you choose. I've seen a lizard pick one rock out of a desert full of rocks and go sit there alone. I've seen a snail pass up 20 rocks and spend all day getting to the one it wanted. You have to make up your own mind. You'll know. All right, that's 10 rules. If you think of any more, write them down yourself. I'm going out to play a game that takes just me and one rock to play. I happen to have a rock here in my hand. And now, although we have no children departing us this morning, let's sing anyway, Go Now in Peace.
Go now in peace, go now in peace. May the love of us surround you everywhere, everywhere you may go.
We'll be coming back to rocks a little later. This morning's reading is a poem by Jane Kenyon called Otherwise. And I actually had someone, I should have brought it with me, I had someone do this in calligraphy for me, and it's framed on one of our walls. I got out of bed on 2 strong legs. It might have been otherwise. I ate cereal, sweet milk, ripe, flawless peach. It might have been otherwise. I took the dog uphill to the birch wood. All morning I did the work I love. At noon I lay down with my mate. It might have been otherwise. We ate dinner together at a table with silver candlesticks. It might have been otherwise. I slept in a bed in a room with paintings on the walls and planned another day just like this day. But one day, I know, it will be otherwise.
our split plate recipient for the month of February is World Central Kitchen. WCK has provided more than 300 million fresh, nourishing meals for communities around the world. And your donation today will be used to support the emergency food relief efforts of World Central Kitchen. Please donate generously and give with your heart. Thank you. Avi again with one of my favorites.
I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and for you. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I see skies of blue, clouds of white, bright blessed day and the dark sacred night. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the skies, are also on the faces of the people passing by. I see friends shaking hands, saying, how do you do? They're really saying, I love you. I hear babies crying, I watch them grow. They'll learn much more than I'll ever know. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the skies, are also on the faces of the people passing by. I see friends shaking hands, saying, how do you do? They're really saying, I love you. I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and for you. And I think to myself, myself. What a wonderful world. Yeah, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world.
Seems a little superfluous to say anything now. Avi kind of covered it all right there, as he always does. In my little Mennonite church last Sunday, the worship leader opened the service by telling us about a bumper sticker she had seen on her way to church. It read, "I would rather be here right now." We've all seen those stickers that say where people would rather be. I'd rather be sailing, I'd rather be fishing. There's all kinds of them. Anywhere than where I actually am is the implication. And compared to sitting in a traffic jam, for example, or dealing with rude, aggressive drivers on the highway, those other options might indeed sound more appealing. But how refreshing that someone might choose instead to be present to the moment they're actually in, rather than wishing they were somewhere else. Because we all know, although it's very easy to forget, that this moment right now is the only one we have. And so often we spend it wishing we were somewhere else. I spend a lot of time wishing away the present moment, thinking about being somewhere else or doing something different. But today is the first Sunday of Lent. And while I realize a lot of Unitarian Universalists don't pay much attention to the seasons of the church year, I want to reflect for a few minutes on Lent as a season for mindfulness, for choosing to be where we are, for paying attention. Lent starts on Ash Wednesday, so it started this past Wednesday, and it continues for the 40 days leading up to Easter. It commemorates the 40 days that Jesus spent in the wilderness after his baptism, according to the Gospels. And it's a season for confronting our human frailness, our mortality. The heart of the Ash Wednesday service is the moment when the worshipers go forward and the priest or officiant marks their forehead with ashes and says, and ideally looks them right in the eye, and says, "Remember that you are dust, and to dust you shall return." It's a sobering moment, and one that has become very important to me on an annual basis. I was actually really disappointed this year that at the joint Mennonite service that I went to on Ash Wednesday, they didn't say that. They said something like, "Repent and accept the something love of Jesus." They didn't remind me that I was dust, and that to dust I was going to return, and that's why I went. So next year I'll probably go join the Episcopalians again like I used to. I need that reminder from time to time when I can get so caught up in my own self-importance that, like everybody else, I'm just one mortal human being. Most of us don't particularly like confronting our own mortality. We avoid death in this culture. We cover the pile of earth at the cemetery with fake green grass so that we can pretend that we're not actually putting a body in the ground. We keep people in hospitals rather than encouraging them to be home with their families to die. We try everything to keep people alive a little longer, even when we know there's no possible good outcome. I realize the only contradiction to this is how much of our entertainment, in terms of mystery novels and detective series on television, focus on death, watching people die and then figuring out who killed them. So I need to sit with that because that suddenly struck me as this really interesting paradox with how much we try to avoid real death in this culture. But Lent asks us to look directly at our mortality and face it and even embrace it. Now, I admit there's a certain irony to this, because Lent is the season of preparation for the events of Easter, when many Christians believe that we receive the assurance of eternal life. That, as one of the Easter hymns says, "For Jesus has risen and we shall not die." So what does it mean to confront our mortality if we also believe we're going to live forever? I'll reflect a little more about that when I return on Easter Sunday, but here's a spoiler: I don't believe we're going to live forever. So for me, the brevity of life is exactly what makes it so incredibly precious and meaningful. But despite that tension, even in Christian communities, Lent is still a reminder of how brief and precious and fragile life is. And for me, who believes so firmly that it's the only life I'll get, it's a time to remember to pay attention to it and not take anything about it for granted. Now, traditionally, Lent is also a time for sacrifice, a time to try to enter into the suffering of Christ through some practice of self-denial. But many Christians choose to understand it differently, to understand it more as I do, that it's a time to remember our fragility, our frailty, and because we are frail and fragile, we recognize that everyone we encounter is frail and fragile. And so we recommit ourselves to tenderness toward each other and toward ourselves. So it's a time to be more aware of each small moment and to choose to be here right now rather than somewhere else. Now, some of you have heard me describe in the past my Lenten practice of choosing not to eat flour or sugar for 40 days. It certainly knocks a lot of things out of my diet, most of them the things that I reach for mindlessly when I'm not really hungry. Cookies, crackers, pretzels. I don't do it as a means of self-denial or penitence. Instead, the practice forces me to think about what I'm eating and to realize how much more I have, not just in terms of food, but in terms of everything, how much more I have than I actually need. And then to appreciate the things that I still choose to consume. I find that once I've been off sugar for a couple of weeks, I notice how sweet other things are that I often don't even notice. Fruit is obvious, but things like carrots, sautéed onions. By the end of Lent, a sweet potato tastes like candy. By choosing not to have certain things, I appreciate the things I do have much more. It strips away some of the distractions. It helps me focus better. Food becomes a sort of metaphor for other things in my life that are less healthy or unnecessary or even harmful that I do anyway. Now, mind you, I should give up a lot of other distractions and unhealthy things, but we each do what we can. But giving something up isn't the only way to become more aware of what's around us here and now. All we really need to do is pay more attention. And as we do that, we may begin to see the beauty that might otherwise escape us. The beauty in the small things that we might not even notice or find important until we remember how short our time is to appreciate them. Our reading this morning, Jane Kenyon's poem, Otherwise, lifts up all the beautiful moments in what was for her a very ordinary day, moments she might easily have taken for granted. What makes the poem more poignant is that a year after it was published, she was diagnosed with a virulent form of leukemia, and she died a year after that. Now, some of the sources that I looked at when I was searching for Otherwise and trying to find out more about the poem said that it was written after her diagnosis. And that would in a way be more poignant and more romantic, but in fact that isn't true, because in the afterword of her collected poems, which was written by her husband, who would probably know, it's clear that that poem was published first in a collection that came out a year before she was diagnosed. And only one of the poems in the collected poems, he said, was written post-illness. But she certainly had experienced enough loss and sorrow in her own life to be aware that she could not take those daily moments of grace and beauty for granted. She knew, even before she was diagnosed, that one day it would be otherwise. And we know that too. But so often, at least for me, I would rather forget that fact. I don't like to think about the otherwise part, especially when things are going well. I forget how short life is, I forget how fragile it is, I forget how important it is to acknowledge that and to see it in the people I encounter. I forget to be tender toward myself and toward the world. I forget that the most important thing I can do is to be here right now, to love people, like that wonderful opening song. And I have found again and again that it's the poets who call me back, who remind me to that appreciation of those small moments that I might otherwise overlook. So I want to share a few other poems and reflect on them, poems that help me remember this. But first I want to look at a couple of those images in Jane Kenyon's poem. Eating cereal with milk and peaches, walking the dog in the woods, doing her work, which for her was writing poetry, lying down with her mate, making love, napping. We don't know. It doesn't matter. The moment is still precious. Lighting candles, eating dinner, sleeping in a bed, planning another day, all so ordinary. But at the same time, also so extraordinary, for the simple reason that it won't always be this way. There's another poem, much less well known, that makes the same point that I love. It's called Glad Day. This was written by Barbara Schisler, who was a Mennonite pastor. She was the pastor of my congregation at the time that I began attending there. She died several years ago. And I'm not sure when this was written, but I don't think she was ill yet when she wrote it. Gladness comes with me when the clock chimes 10 and I put the house to bed. Tired spouse already down. The dogs trot sweetly to her crate, crunching a biscuit. On the table, the daffodils, so yellow they lit my eyes all day. Books and yarn away, the candles out. Gladness walks with me. I set my cup in the sink, see the crumbs he left making his sandwich for tomorrow. The refrigerator hums, cooling the leftover stew from supper. I will hold this day for a future day, when anguish comes with me instead. Both these poems highlight the importance of noticing and appreciating ordinary moments, the moments we might otherwise take for granted, because it won't always be this way. We carry with us, even in the sweetest moments, the knowledge of sorrow and grief. But of course, it's not only when things are going well and it's so easy to forget that we need to notice and appreciate the small things. In fact, when life is very difficult, sometimes it's precisely those very small things that can help us hold on, can give us the courage to face another day. It might be just the need to be called back out of a bad mood sometimes. And I love Robert Frost's little poem, A Dust of Snow. The way a crow shook down on me a dust of snow from a hemlock tree has given my heart a change of mood and saved some part of a day I had rued. Something as simple as that. We don't know why Frost's heart needed a change of mood. It might have been something very serious. He might have just gotten up on the wrong side of the bed that morning. Poets are notoriously moody. We don't know why he was ruining the day. Maybe it was some small disappointment. Maybe it was something big. But at least part of his day was saved by the delight of that snow showering down on him, dislodged by a crow in the hemlock tree. A crow he probably otherwise wouldn't even have noticed. He makes me want to pay more attention to the things that can give my heart a change of mood. If you're like me, it's easy when you're feeling cranky to sort of hunker down into it and hold on to it as if it's some weird sense of entitlement. I'm in a bad mood, darn it, don't try to cheer me up. And of course, people who just say, oh, cheer up, aren't particularly helpful. But that dust of snow, if I can pay attention to it, moments when I'm walking through the park by the creek near my house where I often take my daily walks, and suddenly I see a bluebird swooping over the creek, trying to catch insects as it flies. Or a fox darts across my path. Every now and then that will happen. And it just startles me back to being aware. Or for that matter, it might be the driver who gestures me into a long line of traffic when I don't expect them to. Or the total stranger who holds the door for me at Wawa when my hands are full of coffee cups. It doesn't take much sometimes to change the mood if I pay attention. And then it's harder, but perhaps even more important, to love the small things when things are at their worst. Because sometimes the smallest of blessings can pull us back from the edge. And the poem that embodies this for me, and this one, I have tried to use this as my reading 3 or 4 times with you over the last 6 months or so. And I choose it as the reading, and I work on the sermon, and the sermon ends up going somewhere else, and I set it aside and use a different reading. But today it's exactly what I need. It's a short prose poem by Lorna Crozier, and I meant to look her up and find out more about her. I forgot to do that. It's called Eggs. Your friend, who suffers from despair, sometimes composes a gratitude list that starts with the first letter of the alphabet. Her intention is to make it to the 26th, but she always stops at E. So far, that's sufficient. E for eggs gives her enough good feeling to turn on the light and find some shoes. I love that the simple existence of eggs could be enough to pull someone back from the brink and allow them to start their day. What might it be for you? We all have times in our life when we are in despair. Some of us suffer from chronic depressions that leave us in despair much more often than others, but life events can put us there. The events of the world around us, especially lately, can put us there. What small things can remind us, even at the hardest of times, that life is still worth living? It's a question worth thinking about, and for me at least, Lent is a good time for that kind of reflection. But the poem that actually inspired this sermon is one by William Stafford, and it's simply titled, Yes. It could happen any time. Tornado, earthquake, Armageddon. It could happen. Or sunshine, love, salvation. It could, you know. That's why we wake and look out. No guarantees in this life. But some bonuses, like morning, like right now, like noon, like evening. Anything could happen. Life is uncertain. Right now is a bonus. Not something to take for granted, but an astonishing gift full of small wonders. Like morning, like right now, like noon, like evening. In other words, every single moment of our lives. I chose the story I did for this morning because for me it is a great example of appreciating and loving the small things. Paying such close attention to choosing a rock, getting down at ground level to look at them closely, to think about the shape and the texture and the size and the color. And those 10 rules are great for paying attention to just about anything. But for me, the real wonder of it is that an ordinary rock could be something so special. So at the close of the service, for those of you who are here in person, I'm going to invite you to come up and choose a rock. If you're with us on Zoom, you might want to go out, you might have to wait till some of the snow melts, and do some looking yourself and see if you can find the perfect one. But I have an assortment here, different shapes, sizes, colors, and textures that will be available for anyone who would like just the right rock to carry in your pocket. As you look at them, pay attention to the shape and the color, the way they fit in your hand. Marvel at the individuality and the beauty of the different rocks. Pick the one that might help you remember to pay attention and to love the small things in this one precious life that you have. But before we move on to the close of the service, I want to leave you with one more poem. The poet Ted Kooser started going on very early morning walks every day when he was recovering from surgery and treatment for cancer. After each day's walk, he wrote a short poem, which he would then paste on a postcard and send to his friend, the writer Jim Harrison. He published 100 of these little poems, about 6 lines long, in a collection called Winter Morning Walks. And near the end, we find this one. I saw the season's first bluebird this morning, 1 month ahead of its scheduled arrival. Lucky I am to go off to my cancer appointment, having been given a bluebird, and for a lifetime, having been given this world. We have been given this world for a lifetime, although most of us don't have any idea how long that will be. But lucky are we to have been given bluebirds and eggs and cereal with ripe peach and people to love and kindnesses from strangers and bonuses like morning, like noon, like evening, like right now. Let's not waste it by wishing we were someplace else. This Lent, I choose to be here right now and to love the small things that give me hope. Join me.
Now is the time in our service when we recognize and lift up one another in love. Please come up to this microphone and share your joy or sorrow. Please be brief. I'll get started actually with a bit of a sorrow related to the Super Bowl, which we all enjoyed, hopefully. I mentioned last week that one of the players was a local kid, a safety, who played for Trenton Central High School. He had an interception in the game. That's terrific. But this Super Bowl will be marred by the gun violence at the celebration and the parade. And it's another reminder, another incident, another drop in this bucket that needs to start to overflow. And I really want to hear more people talking about how maybe we could change our relationship with guns in this country by re-looking at the Second Amendment, and more politicians talking about the fact that maybe it's not right to have a right. We don't need to have a right to have a gun. Anyway. Whether or not you shared today, for your joys in this community, we join you in celebration, and for any sorrows or concerns you feel, please feel our sympathy and our compassion. And now please join me in singing Spirit of Life.
Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind,
please join me in a responsive reading. Never does hatred cease by hating in return. Only through love can hatred come to an end. Victory breeds hatred. The conquered dwell in sorrow and resentment. They who give up all thought of victory or defeat may be calm and live happily at peace. Let us overcome violence by gentleness. Let us overcome good by good. Let us overcome the miserly by liberality. Let us overcome the liar by truth. From Dhammapada, the Buddhist path of wisdom. And now for our closing song, please stand, if able, for hymn number 95, There Is More Love Somewhere. So, the chalice is now extinguished, but its light lives on in the minds and hearts and souls of each one of you. Carry the flame with you as you leave this place and share it with those that you love, especially with those that you have yet to meet. Our service is concluded. For those of you on Zoom, thank you for joining us today. We hope you can join us again next week. And in the meantime, I want to thank Reverend Libby Smith for another wonderful sermon. And everybody here, please join us in the cafeteria for fellowship, some coffee, and conversation. Go now in peace. Amen, and blessed be.